If you clicked on this video, pause for a moment and listen carefully. Not because something magical is guaranteed to happen in the next 30 minutes. Not because you were secretly selected above billions of other people. But because there may be something your heart has been trying to tell you for a very long time, and today you finally decided to stop scrolling long enough to hear it. July 10th is just another date on the calendar for many people. Yet for someone watching this right now, it may become the day they remember forever. The day they stopped running. The day they stopped pretending everything was fine. The day they admitted they were tired. The day they finally opened the door they had been keeping shut. And if that person is you, then stay with me until the end. Because this message is about something most people never talk about. The silent battles. The hidden tears. The prayers whispered when nobody else is around. The moments when you smile in public but feel empty inside. You see, many people think faith is only needed when life is falling apart. But sometimes the greatest distance between a person and God appears when everything seems normal. Bills are paid. Food is on the table. The routine continues. And yet something feels missing. A strange emptiness. A quiet ache. A feeling that there must be more than this. Maybe you felt it recently. Maybe you woke up one morning and couldn't explain why your heart felt heavy. Maybe you've been thinking about your future more than usual. Maybe you've been questioning decisions you've made. Maybe you've been carrying regret. Maybe you've been carrying fear. Or maybe you've been carrying both. What if the reason this message found you today is because you've been searching for answers without even realizing it? What if you've been asking questions deep inside your heart that words could never fully express? Questions like, am I going in the right direction? Does anyone truly understand what I'm carrying? Will things ever get better? Have my prayers been heard? Does my life matter? These questions are older than history itself. Every generation asks them. Every heart wrestles with them. And yet very few people are willing to face them honestly. Most distract themselves. Most stay busy. Most keep moving. Because stopping means feeling. And feeling means confronting the things we've tried to avoid. But today, something different is happening. Today, you're listening. Today, you're paying attention. Today, you're allowing yourself to consider the possibility that your life has more meaning than you've been giving it. Think about the last few weeks. How many moments passed that seemed ordinary? A conversation. A memory. A sudden thought. A feeling you couldn't explain. Most people dismiss these moments immediately. But sometimes the smallest moments reveal the biggest truths. A seed doesn't look powerful. A single drop of rain doesn't look powerful. A quiet whisper doesn't look powerful. Yet entire forests begin with seeds. Rivers begin with drops. And lives change because of whispers. The biggest turning points rarely announce themselves. They arrive quietly. Almost unnoticed. Until one day you realize everything changed. And perhaps that's why you're here. Not because lightning struck. Not because the sky opened. Not because a supernatural sign appeared in front of you. But because something inside you knows it's time to pay attention. There are people watching right now who have spent years trying to prove their worth. Years trying to earn acceptance. Years trying to become enough. Enough for family. Enough for friends. Enough for society. Enough for themselves. The exhausting truth is that no matter how much they achieve, the feeling never completely disappears. Because the problem was never achievement. The problem was believing that value had to be earned. Many people spend their entire lives chasing approval. Yet the approval they need most is the approval they've never given themselves. And that creates a prison. A prison without bars. A prison built from comparison. A prison built from fear. A prison built from insecurity. Every day they wake up and measure themselves against someone else. Someone richer. Someone smarter. Someone more successful. Someone more attractive. Someone who seems to have everything together. But comparison is a game nobody wins. Because no matter how far you go, someone else will always appear ahead. And while you're focused on what you lack, you forget what you've already survived. Take a moment and think about everything you've overcome. The difficult seasons. The disappointments. The betrayals. The setbacks. The nights when you thought you couldn't continue. Yet here you are. Still standing. Still breathing. Still moving forward. Maybe slower than you hoped. Maybe more wounded than expected. But still here. And that matters. More than you realize. Because survival itself is evidence of strength. Strength isn't always loud. Strength isn't always impressive. Sometimes strength looks like getting out of bed when you don't want to. Sometimes strength looks like trying again after failure. Sometimes strength looks like continuing even when nobody notices. And sometimes strength looks like sitting here right now, listening to words that challenge you to think differently. There is another truth many people avoid. The future they fear often exists only in their imagination. Think about that. How much energy have you spent worrying about things that never happened? How many nights were lost to scenarios that never became reality? Fear has a remarkable ability to make shadows appear larger than they really are. Fear whispers that you're alone. Fear whispers that you're doomed. Fear whispers that things will never improve. Fear whispers that it's too late. But fear is not always telling the truth. And the moment you begin questioning fear instead of obeying it, something powerful happens. Its control starts breaking. Little by little. Day by day. Choice by choice. The chains loosen. The weight lifts. The perspective changes. And suddenly possibilities appear where walls once stood. Imagine what your life would look like if fear stopped making your decisions. Imagine what would happen if you trusted courage more than anxiety. Imagine what could change if you stopped assuming the worst. Many people never ask these questions. Because hope feels risky. Hope requires vulnerability. Hope requires faith. Not necessarily certainty. Not necessarily guarantees. But the willingness to believe that tomorrow may be different from today. And that willingness changes everything. Because people who believe change is possible behave differently. They think differently. They speak differently. They act differently. And over time those differences create entirely new outcomes. Perhaps the greatest tragedy isn't failure. Perhaps the greatest tragedy is giving up before discovering what was possible. Some dreams take longer than expected. Some answers arrive later than expected. Some victories come after countless setbacks. But delayed does not always mean denied. A seed underground looks inactive. Yet growth is happening where nobody can see it. The same can be true in life. There are seasons when progress is invisible. Seasons when nothing seems to change. Seasons when prayers appear unanswered. Yet beneath the surface, roots are forming. Character is developing. Wisdom is growing. Perspective is deepening. Preparation is happening. And one day the growth becomes visible. One day what was hidden appears. One day the waiting makes sense. Not always immediately. Not always completely. But enough to understand why the journey mattered. So if you've been feeling discouraged lately, hear this. Your story is not finished. Your future is not written by your worst day. Your mistakes are not the final chapter. Your disappointments are not the conclusion. There is more ahead. More learning. More growth. More healing. More opportunity. More purpose. And perhaps that realization is the real message you needed today. Not a prediction. Not a secret timeline. Not a mysterious revelation. But a reminder. A reminder that your life matters. A reminder that hope still matters. A reminder that faith still matters. A reminder that you are capable of more than fear wants you to believe. As this message continues, think carefully about one question. If you knew that change was possible, what would you do differently starting today? Hold that question in your heart. Because the answer may reveal more about your future than any prediction ever could. And what comes next may challenge you even further. Now hold on to that question for a moment. If you truly believe that change was possible, what would you do differently starting today? Most people answer that question too quickly. They immediately think about money. A better job. A bigger house. More success. More recognition. But what if the deepest change you need has nothing to do with your circumstances? What if the real transformation begins inside you? Because the truth is this. A person can gain everything they thought they wanted and still feel empty. History is filled with people who reached the top only to discover that the view wasn't what they expected. They spent years climbing a mountain and then realized they had been climbing the wrong one. That is why moments of reflection are so important. Not because reflection solves every problem, but because it helps reveal which problems actually matter. Many people spend years fighting battles they were never meant to fight. Trying to impress people who will never be impressed. Trying to earn love from people who have already decided not to give it. Trying to force doors open that were never meant to open. The result is exhaustion. Mental exhaustion. Emotional exhaustion. Spiritual exhaustion. And eventually people begin asking a dangerous question. What's the point? Maybe you've asked that question before. Maybe not out loud. Maybe not even consciously. But somewhere deep inside. When another disappointment arrived. When another prayer seemed unanswered. When another opportunity disappeared. When another relationship failed. When another struggle appeared. You wondered if your efforts even mattered. You wondered if anyone saw your pain. You wondered if anyone understood. The answer may not come in the way you expect. Because sometimes understanding doesn't arrive through explanations. Sometimes it arrives through perspective. Imagine looking at a puzzle piece by itself. It seems random, meaningless, confusing. You cannot understand its purpose. But when placed into the full picture, everything changes. Suddenly the piece makes sense. Life often feels like looking at a single puzzle piece. We see one moment, one problem, one setback, one unanswered question. But we cannot yet see the full picture. And because we cannot see the full picture, we assume there isn't one. That assumption creates despair. Yet history repeatedly shows that today's confusion often becomes tomorrow's clarity. Many people can look back on difficult seasons and say something surprising. I wouldn't choose to relive it, but it taught me something important. Pain has a strange ability to reveal what comfort often hides. Pain exposes priorities. Pain reveals character. Pain uncovers strengths we didn't know existed. Pain forces growth. That doesn't mean pain is good. It doesn't mean suffering should be celebrated. But it does mean difficult seasons can produce meaningful outcomes. Think about the strongest people you've ever met. The wisest people. The most compassionate people. Rarely did their strength come from an easy life. Usually it came from challenges. From losses. From struggles. From moments that tested everything they believed. And yet they emerged stronger. Not because they avoided hardship, but because they learned from it. Perhaps that is where you are right now. In a season that feels confusing. A season that feels uncertain. A season that feels heavy. If so, remember this. Uncertainty is not the same as failure. Waiting is not the same as defeat. Questions are not the same as hopelessness. Sometimes the most important growth happens while answers are still missing. And sometimes the greatest breakthroughs begin when people stop demanding certainty before taking the next step. Because certainty is rare. Very few people ever have complete certainty. Most move forward despite uncertainty. Most grow despite uncertainty. Most succeed despite uncertainty. The difference is not certainty. The difference is courage. Courage doesn't mean feeling fearless. Courage means moving forward while fear is present. Courage means continuing when the outcome isn't guaranteed. Courage means choosing faith over paralysis. And that choice changes lives. There is something else you need to hear today. You are not defined by the opinions of people who misunderstood you. This is a burden many carry. The burden of being judged unfairly. The burden of being labeled incorrectly. The burden of being reduced to a mistake. Maybe someone only remembers your worst moment. Maybe someone formed an opinion without knowing the full story. Maybe someone spoke words that left scars. And maybe those words still echo in your mind. The problem is that repeated criticism often becomes internalized. After hearing something enough times, people begin believing it. They begin treating accusations like facts. They begin carrying identities they were never meant to carry. But opinions are not destiny. Labels are not destiny. Past failures are not destiny. One mistake cannot summarize an entire life. One chapter cannot define an entire book. Yet many people live as though it can. They surrender possibilities because of old wounds. They avoid opportunities because of old fears. They stop believing because disappointment convinced them to stop trying. What if today marked the beginning of a different mindset? What if today became the day you stopped measuring your future by your past? Not because the past doesn't matter, but because the past is meant to teach, not imprison. There is wisdom in remembering lessons. There is danger in living permanently inside old pain. Healing requires moving forward. Growth requires moving forward. Purpose requires moving forward. And while moving forward isn't always easy, it is always possible. One step at a time. One decision at a time. One day at a time. Many people underestimate the power of small decisions. They think only dramatic moments create change. But life is usually shaped by ordinary choices repeated consistently. A healthy choice repeated daily. A kind word repeated daily. A prayer repeated daily. A disciplined action repeated daily. Over time, small actions become powerful outcomes. That is how transformation happens. Not usually overnight, but gradually, steadily, quietly, until one day the difference becomes undeniable. The challenge is that most people quit too early. They expect immediate results, immediate clarity, immediate success, immediate breakthroughs. When those things don't arrive, discouragement takes over. Yet nearly everything valuable requires patience. Trees require patience. Relationships require patience. Wisdom requires patience. Character requires patience. Growth requires patience. The question is whether you're willing to continue before results become visible. Because that is where many dreams are lost. Not through inability, but through impatience. Not through weakness, but through surrender. Imagine how many people were one step away from a breakthrough when they decided to stop. Imagine how many opportunities were abandoned too soon. Imagine how many stories ended before reaching the best chapter. Don't let that become your story. Not now. Not when you've already come this far. Not when you've survived everything behind you. Not when there is still so much ahead. And here's something remarkable. The fact that you're still searching, still listening, still hoping, still trying, means part of you already believes a better future is possible. Otherwise you wouldn't be here. You would have stopped long ago. The presence of hope, even a small amount, matters more than you realize. Because hope is often where change begins. A tiny spark. A small light. A quiet belief. And then that spark grows. It becomes determination. It becomes action. It becomes perseverance. It becomes transformation. The people who eventually change their lives are not always the most talented. Not always the luckiest. Not always the strongest. Often they are simply the people who refuse to quit. The people who kept moving. The people who kept believing. The people who kept trying one more time. And maybe that is exactly what you need to do. One more prayer. One more effort. One more step. One more day. One more attempt. Because the story is not over. The chapter is not finished. And what comes next may reveal something you've been missing all along. Stay with this message. Because in the next part, we're going to talk about the hidden obstacles that quietly steal peace, confidence, and purpose from millions of people without them ever realizing it. Now we arrive at something that most people never notice. Not because it is hidden. Not because it is complicated. But because it operates so quietly that many never realize it is affecting their lives. The obstacle I'm talking about is not a person. It is not a place. It is not even a circumstance. It is a mindset. A pattern of thinking. A way of seeing yourself and the world. And if left unchecked, it can quietly steal years from your life. Think about how many opportunities have been lost because someone assumed failure before trying. How many relationships were damaged because someone expected rejection before speaking. How many dreams disappeared because someone convinced themselves they were not capable. The battle often begins long before any action is taken. It begins in the mind. Because every action follows a belief. And every belief shapes a future. If a person believes they are defeated, they often stop fighting. If a person believes they are worthless, they stop seeing their value. If a person believes nothing will change, they stop looking for possibilities. That is why protecting your mind is so important. Not in the sense of ignoring reality. Not in the sense of pretending problems don't exist. But in refusing to allow negativity to become your identity. You may face challenges. You may face setbacks. You may face disappointment. But those experiences are events. They are not your identity. Many people confuse the two. A failure happens. Then they call themselves a failure. A rejection happens. Then they call themselves unwanted. A mistake happens. Then they call themselves broken. Do you see the difference? The event becomes an identity. And once that happens, the burden becomes much heavier. Because identities influence behavior. If you believe something negative about yourself long enough, eventually you begin acting as though it is true. That is why one of the most important decisions a person can make is choosing which voice they will listen to. The voice of fear. Or the voice of faith. The voice of doubt. Or the voice of possibility. The voice of discouragement. Or the voice of hope. Every day those voices compete for attention. Every day they offer different futures. And every day people make choices based on which voice they trust. Consider this. The same storm can produce completely different outcomes. One person sees only destruction. Another sees an opportunity to rebuild stronger. One person sees only loss. Another discovers unexpected growth. The difference is not always the storm. The difference is perspective. Perspective changes everything. A challenge viewed as a punishment feels unbearable. A challenge viewed as a lesson feels different. Still difficult. Still painful. But different. Because meaning changes endurance. People can survive incredible hardships when they believe those hardships have meaning. That truth has appeared throughout history again and again. The strongest individuals are not necessarily those who avoided suffering. They are often those who found purpose despite suffering. Purpose gives strength. Purpose gives direction. Purpose gives endurance. And perhaps that is what you need most right now. Not perfect answers. Not instant solutions. But renewed purpose. A reason to keep moving. A reason to keep believing. A reason to keep growing. Because when purpose is clear, obstacles become smaller. Not smaller in reality, but smaller in comparison to what you're moving toward. Think about a traveler crossing a difficult mountain. The climb is exhausting. The path is steep. The weather is uncertain. Yet they continue. Why? Because they know where they are going. Purpose turns hardship into a journey. Without purpose, hardship feels meaningless. With purpose, hardship becomes part of the process. This is why so many people drift through life feeling lost. Not because they lack ability. Not because they lack intelligence. But because they have forgotten their direction. They wake up. Repeat routines. Complete obligations. Then repeat the cycle again. Days become weeks. Weeks become months. Months become years. And somewhere along the way they stop asking important questions. What kind of person am I becoming? What matters most? What legacy am I creating? What values guide my decisions? Am I living intentionally or merely existing? These questions matter. More than most realize. Because success without purpose often feels empty. Achievement without meaning often feels hollow. Recognition without fulfillment rarely satisfies the heart. The deepest fulfillment comes when actions align with values. When life aligns with purpose. When effort aligns with meaning. And that alignment begins with honesty. Honesty about where you are. Honesty about what needs to change. Honesty about what you've been avoiding. Sometimes the greatest breakthrough starts with a simple admission. I need to grow. Not because you're weak. Because you're human. Every person needs growth. Every person has blind spots. Every person has areas that require attention. The strongest people are usually the ones willing to admit it. Growth begins where pride ends. Wisdom begins where arrogance ends. Transformation begins where excuses end. And perhaps today is inviting you into that transformation. Not through pressure. Not through fear. But through awareness. Awareness of who you are. Awareness of who you can become. Awareness of what truly matters. As this message approaches its conclusion, remember something important. You do not need to have every answer today. You do not need to solve every problem today. You do not need to carry tomorrow's burden today. You only need enough courage for the next step. The next conversation. The next decision. The next act of faith. The next moment of perseverance. Life is rarely changed in one dramatic moment. More often it is changed through countless small decisions that point in the right direction. A better thought. A better habit. A better choice. Repeated consistently. Until the future begins looking different from the past. If you've listened this far, consider what message stands out most to you. Perhaps it was the reminder that your story is not finished. Perhaps it was the reminder that fear does not always tell the truth. Perhaps it was the reminder that growth is often happening even when you cannot see it. Perhaps it was the reminder that your value does not depend on other people's opinions. Whatever resonated with you, don't let it disappear the moment this video ends. Carry it with you. Think about it. Reflect on it. Apply it. Because information alone changes very little. Applied wisdom changes lives. And maybe that is the real reason you found this message today. Not because of a secret prediction. Not because of a hidden countdown. Not because you were singled out from everyone else. But because at this exact moment in your life, you were willing to listen. Willing to reflect. Willing to consider a different perspective. And sometimes that willingness becomes the beginning of an entirely new chapter. A chapter marked by greater faith. Greater wisdom. Greater courage. Greater peace. Greater purpose. So as you leave this message, remember this simple truth. You have survived every difficult day behind you. You have overcome challenges you once thought impossible. You have made it through moments you were certain would break you. And because of that, there is every reason to believe you can face whatever comes next. Keep moving forward. Keep growing. Keep believing. Keep choosing hope over fear. Keep choosing purpose over despair. Keep choosing faith over doubt. Because your story is still being written. And some of the most meaningful pages may still be ahead.